Fabulous. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And thank you in particular to our guest today, Jacky Stabler from Full Circle Bakes. Now, the reason that I was really, really inspired to have Jacky come and talk about her life was because I have some research background in employment in particularly autism, but more global neurodiversity as well. And I've really noticed that the fixation is about integrating people into organizations and not necessarily people that don't want to be part of an organization or have passions and goals and aspirations that are more self-motivated and entrepreneurial. And it's not really something that I've encountered much in the literature. And I thought it would be really wonderful to hear from somebody who has lived that kind of life. So Jacky, I'll hand it over to you. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be amazing to start with.
Hi. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. It was really nice to be asked to do something like this. So my name is Jacky. I'm 25 years old, and I started my business back in 2019. So baking has always been like my OG special interest before I knew what special interests were. I started baking back with my mum when I was like 8 or 9 years old. My brother was involved in a local group that was sort of like fundraising to build a skate park nearby. So there'd be like various like market sort of events where there'd be a stall and we'd do fundraising. So I baked with my mum for that. And pretty much as soon as I started baking, I was like, this is amazing. This is so much fun. So I just started teaching myself how to bake. When I was 15, I started a cupcake business when I was in high school called Jackys Cupcakes. Did that for a couple of years and then stopped when I started working in bars because I just didn't really have the time for that. But I got a bit distracted for a while working in bars, but like no matter what I tried to do, I always just sort of ended up back in with like baking and all of that. So for ages, I was trying to get a job as like a baker or pastry chef, but no one would take me seriously because I didn't have any experience or qualifications, even though I knew that I was good enough to go work somewhere. I just needed something on paper. So I started a HND in professional cookery in 2018, something like that, a few years ago. And then halfway through that, it was a 2-year course, I started Full Circle Bakes. I started it during the summer between my first and second year because I don't do very well with having free time. I need to fill it up with just many things, which I'm now realizing is probably ADHD, which
relatable content, yeah.
Which I'm like going through the diagnosis journey for at the moment, but I had free time, decided I was bored, and I was like, I'll start a business. That'll cure my free time. In my second year of college, I was still working part-time as like a baker and a chef, but I decided to quit my job and just do the whole self-employed baker sort of thing. So I sold at a market once a month while I was in college for that second year. I was still getting SAS, but it was just enough to sort of bulk it up. Then I graduated college in 2020, sort of springtime, which obviously then the world went up in flames. Yeah. And suddenly I wasn't getting SAS anymore and I was self-employed. There was like no safety net because I was doing markets. I couldn't do that anymore. And then obviously at that time, I was still at the point I was buying ingredients from supermarkets. And when the restrictions were kind of put in, you can only buy 1 bag of flour and it's hard to make a decent amount of money from 1 bag of flour. So I basically just had a few months where I just had to sort of go through my savings and wait for things to calm down a little bit. So I started back up in it must have been about June 2020. I was baking out of my parents' kitchen, just doing treat boxes once a week. But they didn't go very well, if I'm being honest with you. It was a real struggle. So I decided to start doing postal orders, which basically just kickstarted this whole journey that I've been on. I ended up subletting a kitchen August 2019 in the city centre. And then by January 2021, I got the keys to the unit that's now the shop. So it's been a pretty quick process. But I think the pandemic definitely had a major part to play in that because, like I said, suddenly there wasn't a safety net. Like I just had to put my all into it and just make it work, which I think being neurodivergent has definitely did help quite a lot, which you maybe wouldn't expect. But when this is like my life's purpose is like making cakes, it's like it's everything to me. There's no plan B. Like it had to work. And then yeah, it almost felt like at a point I wasn't even in control anymore. It was just growing so much by itself, and I've just had to really learn how to do it because it's been such an insane amount of growth in such a short space of time that I think it's just a really unique position to be in, even being neurodiverse or not.
Yeah, can you tell us was this like a parallel journey with your awareness of or discovery of your own neurodiversity, or did you kind of already have that knowledge before you started Full Circle?
So my kind of journey towards my autism diagnosis, I mentioned sort of working in bars for a while. Throughout that time, my mental health was just awful because it turns out if you're undiagnosed autistic, working in like bars probably isn't the best sort of environment to be in. So it got to the point that when was it? A couple of years ago, I was 21, so I'm 25 now. I attempted suicide, which acted as like a real trigger for actually getting me towards the path for diagnosis. Because it'd been there in the background for a while. My dad was diagnosed with autism in 2011 when he was 44.
Oh, wow.
So that was probably the first time it was like on my radar. But I had very much like the male narrative in my head. So when I was having, psychologists saying, have you considered you might be autistic? I was like, of course I'm not. Like, I'm not, like, I can make eye contact. Like, I can do the social things. I have empathy. Like, I didn't know that it was different for women than it is for men. So when people said, do you think you could be autistic? I just got offended. It's like, of course, that's not what's going on here. But it was only like the suicide attempt led to me going to private therapy because I just couldn't wait for the NHS therapy. And it was a therapist I went to. She was pretty much instrumental in sort of helping me understand that there's huge differences between it. And she was the one who sort of taught me about like the gender bias with the research and all the reasons that I thought I couldn't be autistic were actually reasons why I was. Because I was saying like, if anything, I have too much empathy. I feel everything too deeply. And she was like, yeah, that's what women with autism are like. And it's just learning how different it is has been amazing. And it's been such a positive experience for me all around, which maybe wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
But it's just made so much of my life before suddenly makes sense, which is, I know it's a very common experience that happens with most women who get diagnosed. It's like you get the diagnosis and suddenly start thinking back and you're like, oh, this thing that happened that one time, well, that makes sense now, and that makes sense, and all the things you used to beat yourself up over, suddenly there's like a real tangible reason behind it, and like it's not your fault. And it's like, I don't know, it was an amazing thing getting diagnosed. So if anything, my suicide attempt was like a really positive thing. But I know that again is an issue with women with autism, is a lot of the time they have to, like, you have to get to that point where you're completely rock bottom before anyone really takes your struggles seriously.
Yeah.
Like, I know people that have been told, oh, like women have been told you can't be autistic because you have a partner and you have a kid, so we're not referring you for any assessments. And it's like, it's just crazy, even in like the medical community, the biases that are still going on.
Yeah, I think that seems, from an outsider's perspective, that must be a motivating factor for you to share so openly, on Instagram, what your journey has been, to then help other people in a similar situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that's one of the biggest reasons that I'm so open about what I go through, is like finding out about my own sort of neurodiversity has completely changed my life for the better. And like, my mental health has been awful since I started high school. Like, I had tried everything, but it was like all the therapies that they tried were for like social anxiety, where the therapy is all about desensitizing and repeated exposure to like the situations that make you anxious. But if autism is the root cause, it's not going to work. So I thought I had this incurable anxiety disorder that was going to just go on forever, because even like meltdowns and sensory overload, I thought they were panic attacks. And like, everything that the therapists were saying to help it wasn't helping.
Yeah.
So it's just thinking of all these people that might be out there thinking that like they have this incurable anxiety. It's like, treating the anxiety isn't going to fix it. It's not the root cause. You have to figure out what's causing the anxiety, and then you can make adjustments. Because now I know that like loud, noisy environments don't work well with me. So now that I've been avoiding them, my mental health has been so much better, because I'm not forcing myself into environments that will make me uncomfortable, and no amount of like desensitizing is ever going to change that.
Yeah, of course. Elliot, did you have a question?
I do. We've got something from the chat that relates exactly to where you landed up, so I thought I'd jump in, even though that actual thing you've just been talking about, I personally would like to discuss for several hours, and you can continue to do so. But I will bring the question up. So it's from Amber, and she says, you mentioned the bar was, oh god, my cat, sorry. She said, you mentioned the bar wasn't the best environment. What does your environment look like now that works better for you?
So my bar environment, just to make you realize how it just was really not working. It was really loud, long, unpredictable shifts. You didn't know what you were going into, whether it would be a busy day or like a quiet day, or just didn't know when your break would be. Even getting your rotas, you'd be getting them the day before you were supposed to start. And it ruined me. Even like this starting work at 5 o'clock, like I can't do anything with my day if I'm doing something at 5 o'clock. So I'm like, this thing is happening, I can't do anything because I have to be prepared for the thing that I have to do. Whereas now I'm able to start when I want to start. I think it's like the ADHD part in me. I hate having a really set schedule. Like, I can't get up at the same time every day and do the same thing every day. It just drives me mad. But I have the flexibility where there's like, I have just a little bit of leeway in what I get to do. And if I'm having a day where I'm feeling really burnt out, I can be like, okay, I'll do some more laptop work at home instead of doing the other things. Even when I'm in the bakery, it can be a case of, if the music's annoying me, turning the music off. And like, everyone that I work with knows that I'm autistic. They know about the ADHD. So it's that sense of like not having to worry about like what your co-workers are thinking, because like they know that if I'm really busy, I'm just sort of like jutting about everywhere, and it's just, I'll leave things in random places and start a task and then walk away, and they know, and they're just like, do you want to finish the task that you started? And it's not having a go at me for like, why are you so messy, why are all these things? It's, they understand that like how my brain works, and just having that level of understanding really helps, because even when I'm having a bad day, I like the masking ability isn't going to be there as much, and I'm probably going to be a little bit harsh, probably more so than I anticipate. But they know that, right, okay, put two and two together. If Jacky's really stressed, she was a bit short, probably nothing personal. So just having that really does help. So it's like environment isn't always just about, you know, adjusting the speaker volume and like the lights. It can be like the working environment around you as well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a situation where you can do the things that you need to do to help you work without having to have a big fight or advocate for that to be allowed and justify why you're still a valuable employee, and, you know, all of those things that we only really need to do for others and to get our own needs respected. You can just do without having to go through all of that.
Exactly.
You are the HR department, essentially.
And it goes both ways as well. It goes for like my members of staff, like they're all individuals. If they have accommodations, like I'm happy to make it for them as well. Like even small things. The other day I really wanted to play some Pop Goes Punk. Vetoed right off the bat. They were not having it. They were not working in that environment. Fortunately, I was outnumbered. I was like, okay, we'll put on whatever. They wanted to put the Hercules soundtrack.
That's great.
It's not Pop Goes Punk great, but I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll take this defeat on this one. But even stuff like that, where it's not like a big fight over like really insignificant things in like the long run, that like previous workplaces I've worked at, it's kind of like they love having control over these little tiny things, and like that's what keeps you in line. And it can just make it a lot easier for the staff, just letting them listen to what they want and what they want. And like, it's definitely, it helps create a nice working environment for them as well, which then helps me, because if they're all happy, I'm happy, because I don't have to worry about what they're getting up to. So
it's really interesting, because Amber asked the question as the PhD student of Elliot and I, and one of the things that's come through in some recent data that Amber collected was that, you know, the narrative around, or the stereotype around autism is often about inflexibility, but it's actually tends to be the other way around. It's usually the workplace or the organization that is inflexible, and the autistic person can recognize the benefit of flexibility, the mutual benefits as well. So it sounds like, you know, having that understanding and having that positionality for yourself means that you can then acknowledge that and respect it in other people and the benefits that it brings, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think, kind of on this topic, in terms of your experience being neurodivergent, do you think that gives other, or contributes in other ways to managing a successful team?
I think it definitely does, because even from this sense of like understanding when members of my team are struggling with anxiety, like I have a much better understanding of how that can actually affect your like day-to-day work life. So I do think it helps me sort of connect to the staff on more of like a personal level, which is obviously a hard part about being the boss, is, and especially being autistic, is trying to find the line of, you know, being friendly and supportive to the staff, but not being their friend, and because that could then complicate things, which is definitely something I've had issues with in the past, where I've gotten too friendly with the staff and it's like, oh no, this doesn't work very well, which might be more obvious for for neurotypical people, but for me I've had to do a bit of like a learning curve of like what actually does work for staff and what doesn't work for staff. But I think all of my team know at the end of the day that like I do, like they are my priority, like even if I get things wrong, which I do sometimes. I'm autistic. I sometimes read the room completely wrong and react before stopping to think about how I might have read the room completely wrong. But even with that in mind, like they know that I do really care about them, and like I want to be there to support them wherever I can, because again, the happier they are, the better they work, the better better quality product, the happier the customers are, the less things I have to worry and stress about. So it's like, it's a really small thing that can just make the whole working experience for everyone and the customers and everything just so much better.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone makes those mistakes as well. It's just some people aren't aware of it as much, and so actively being aware that we can't possibly know in advance what will be best for everyone, and not seeing it as like a personal failing if we've got that wrong, or not known to begin with, is just a really brilliant position to come from.
Yeah. So can you tell us kind of about any of the challenges or the unexpected joys of running the bakery, whether or not they're related to being neurodivergent or not, and obviously pandemic aside?
So I'd say challenges wise, I've really made myself the face of the business. It wasn't necessarily what I was intending to do when I started it. When I started doing all the sort of talking stories, it was when my account had grown like massively. We gained, 5,000-6,000 followers in the space of a month, and I suddenly felt really disconnected. And I had all these people following me that I'm like, I don't know who you guys are. Like before that, I'd had the regular sort of people that would comment, that I would message, and suddenly it was like, I just felt really overwhelmed. So I found that like when I started doing the talking stories, it just helped me connect with my following a bit more. But then obviously the downside to that is, as we kept growing, we've got over 15,000 followers now. It gets really tough, because when you're the face of it, it's the internet, people will message really harsh, mean, personal things, without maybe thinking that there's a person on the other side of that. Especially being autistic, possibly ADHD, the sort of emotional dysregulation, it's easy for people to say like, don't let that get to you, just move on from it. I'm like, I can't, it's bothered me, so now I need to like feel the emotion and be bothered, which is tough. And I know it's just part of what I'm doing. This is the downside. But being autistic, I wouldn't want to be like inauthentic. I wouldn't want to sort of like water myself down so I wouldn't get as much hate, and to not be as opinionated, because I've had that a lot. It's like, you're a bakery account, why are you commenting on this issue? And it's like, because I'm autistic and I care about this issue, so I'm going to comment about it. But a lot of people don't like that. But it's something that I just have to get used to, because it's easy to focus on all the negative things people say, even when there's 500 more positive things people have said in comparison to like that one. But it's something that I definitely think, as I continue this journey, I'm going to have to learn how to deal with it a bit more. But that has been an unexpected challenge, to sort of have the lens suddenly so focused on you. And then I guess the other challenge is, as much as I have flexibility with when I work, at the same time, I don't, because I'm the owner. Like this past week, my bakery manager had to isolate for COVID. So I had to go in and work her shifts instead, because there's no one else. Like I have to do it. So it has been really tough trying to avoid getting like really burnt out while I'm trying to balance everything, which like ideally I'd be able to take days off whenever I needed to. But unfortunately, like I've got 6 members of staff now. I can't just take weeks off whenever I want, because again, they're people. They're not just a cog in the machine. They have lives. They need the income. It's not fair for them to like not make money because I'm burnt out and needing to go and wrap myself up in a duvet all day. But what I've been trying to do instead with that is, instead of having full days off, is I try every day to have, a few hours where I get to just sit down and do whatever it is that I want to do and not focus on work things. but then I guess the positive, like the flip side of that, is I've learned how to deal with stress so much better. Like the person I am now compared to when I was working in bars, completely different person. Like if you knew me 4 years ago, you wouldn't recognize who I am now. So it has really sort of accelerated the sort of character development, and I'm much better at dealing with stress. It is still tough, but that's like no one, you know, neurodivergent or not, is going to be like, I am amazing with stress. It never affects me. So that is great. And I guess just the other huge joy is like, I'm not in this for the money. Like, obviously, I need to make enough money to survive, pay my staff, grow the business. But I didn't start this bakery because I wanted to make tons of money selling cookies. I didn't look out there like, what can I sell that would make the most money? I am just so passionate about baking and patisserie and all of it. Like I said, it's been like my OG special interest. So to be able to sell things to people and the people enjoy it and tell me they enjoy it, like it's just such a validating thing to do. So that even when I'm going through all the really stressful times, it's like, well, what would you rather be doing? Like, you could be selling to these people and dealing with like criticism and all of that, or you could go back to working in bars. Like, I don't think so. So yeah, it's both like the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most rewarding thing, hands down. But yeah, it's been quite the journey so far.
Yeah, you mentioned that you know, you're looking into an ADHD diagnosis. Do you find in terms of managing administratively a business, have you kind of found ways to help yourself organize and structure and
other people have implemented ways for me because they see that, oh my god, Jacky is awful at organization and staying on top of tasks. Like, my team at the shop are really good for, I will leave invoices just scattered around the place, so they'll go and like tidy them up and like put them away. There's like boxes, like written labeled things, like I never know where anything is, and they'll be there to be like, Jacky, it's over there. So sorry, the ADHD thing, my brain has lost the train of thought. What was I literally just talking about?
Oh, just the administrative burden that, you know, and then you must obviously, that must kind of balance with the joy of, you know, being able to explore this passion, but then having, and I know from running a dance school as well, that, you know, there's the thing you love and then there's the things you have to do just to make the thing you love work. And sometimes that tipping point isn't always.
I've definitely accepted the fact that I can't do everything. So I've really tried to start like asking for help, or like just accepting help. Like, my mum and dad help a lot with even like watching Remy while I need to work, and like sending in the meter reading on time, because like I can't remember to send a meter reading on a certain day every month. No matter how many reminders I set, it's never going to happen. Even like my invoices and like receipts, I would not be able to sit down and go through them. It's too much of a task. So like my mum and dad will help with that. So there's definitely, it's like definitely made me have to accept that there's certain areas that I really struggle with that most likely are linked to my sort of neurodivergence and like the executive dysfunctioning issues. But luckily I have a sort of support system there that helps. Even like my accountants, last year I had to phone them because I was like, I'm going to be honest with you, my bookkeeping situation is a mess. It's a complete mess. It's just such a backlog, I can't even face it. And they were like, don't worry, we'll find your bookkeeper, we'll get that sorted. So even those sorts of things that, you know, maybe a year and a half ago when I was doing it myself, they were really stressing me out, because I'm not the sort of person that can sit in front of a laptop and like put things into a spreadsheet. It's too menial of a task. My brain is just constantly looking for something else. So I think it's definitely been really good being able to sort of hand off these tasks to other people so I can focus on the things I'm actually good at and that really help the business more, because it's a waste of time, because it's going to take me an entire day to do what a bookkeeper could do in an hour. And I'm going to have a mental breakdown the whole time and probably just cry my way through receipts. So yeah, so there's definitely lots of things I do really struggle with. So I wouldn't want people looking at me and thinking, oh, look, she's got autism and ADHD. She seems to be able to do this really well and has no challenges, which is also partly why I show so much of myself and my life on the stories, just to show people that like, it's not what it seems. Like, yes, I am completely in love with my business. I wouldn't want to do anything else, but I don't love it every day. Some days I really, really, really hate it, but there's nothing else I'd rather do. So yeah, definitely it's taken the commitment that I've had to put in and just the willpower to just keep going has been a lot. But I think that's when the sort of the autism really helps, because that drive and the passion, if you have a chance to make a career out of like your biggest special interest, like you're not going to give that up without a fight, you know? So that's definitely really helped me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's obviously you've found things along the way and implemented them for yourself. Do you think there are things that you would recommend, either if you had to start again or somebody else wanting to start a business, that could help them? Because we have a lot of like mentoring things that are suggested for students or for sometimes for employees, but I'm guessing those kinds of things aren't really available to you if you're starting a business on your own.
So I'd say, looking back, I maybe wish I'd realized earlier on to focus on my strengths and maybe look at my weak points, and instead of trying to do them all, maybe try and find the ones that you could more easily do. But I think when I started, I felt like I have to do everything. If this is a small business, I have to do everything. I'm not working as hard if I get an accountant, if I do these other things, like I have to do it all. But you don't. You don't have to do it all. And it gets so much easier when you're not trying to do it all. Obviously, right at the start, you're going to have to do everything until you've got a bit of momentum behind you. But definitely, I'd say there's no shame in asking other people to help you with things that you're not as confident in, because no one's good at everything. You know, I can bake fantastic cookies, but I cry when I try and do bookkeeping. Like, I break down, and like I'm okay with that. So we can't all be good at everything. I think especially being neurodivergent, there's maybe more of like the sense of not wanting to give up until you get it. Like, you just have to get it, but you don't have to push yourself to like burning out, which is what I did. You can like try it, but like don't force it if it's going to like really affect you badly, like mentally. But at the same time, don't think that because you're neurodivergent that you can't do the things. You absolutely can. It's just about being realistic with maybe how long it's going to take. Like, it's not going to happen overnight, so you really have to put the graft in over quite a while. But if you're committed to it, then, you know, sky's the limit with what you can achieve. Being neurodivergent is absolutely not, should not be in any way like a limit to achieving anything. Like, even in like regular workplaces, like I think it's so silly that it's seen as such a big thing. And it's like, no, it's just the brain processes things differently. It's not a big deal. Like, it's not this huge catastrophic thing that this person wants to wear earplugs while they work. Grand scheme of things, not that big of a deal. So yeah, I definitely say, like, consider your strengths and your weaknesses. Don't push yourself if something is really not your forte. If you can find a way to sort of get around it, find a way. But also go for what you believe in. Like, you know yourself better than anyone. Like, lots of times with my business, I would tell people what I was planning to do, and they'd be like, that's ridiculous. Why are you doing that? that's not going to work. Here's what you should do. Here's what all the other businesses like you do. And this is where the benefits of being neurodivergent is, thinking outside the box, and you don't want to do the thing that everyone else does. So there definitely takes a lot of like perseverance in like having to back yourself up and defend exactly why you're doing what you're doing. But I like that. I'm autistic. I love a good debate.
So this has helpfully led on to a couple of things that have come into the chat, which are about if there's certain things that you think as an autistic person are particularly like beneficial for you as someone who manages people, or if there would be the same thing if one of your employees was autistic. I find it's a difficult question because obviously we're as autistic people, like we're all different, and there aren't like specific things you'll necessarily find in every person. But that idea of thinking out of the box, I think, is maybe one good example. I don't think I would know how to answer that question myself, but maybe you do have thoughts.
So I would say with the sort of other autistic people and kind of managing them, like you said, everyone experiences it differently. Like if you know one neurodivergent person, you know one neurodivergent person. So I think it's a case of just like with myself, like I have neurodivergent members of staff, I've had them in the past, and it's a case of just talking to them and asking them like what would work for you, instead of like Googling how to make accommodations. Just asking the person themselves, like, what can I do to make this easier for you? Which I think a lot of times it's overcomplicated. It feels like it has to be this big deal, like, oh my God, you can't ask them. Like, we just have to assume what they want. We just have to make it. But like, they're autistic. If you just ask them, we love direct communication. Ask us a direct question. We'll tell you exactly what we need. So I have that with the shop, with myself, with all the team, that it shouldn't be a big deal doing any of these things. But I would be as accommodating as I needed to be. Like, I've not had any weird requests so far, but I'm like, if it means you can work, do whatever. Like, I don't really mind.
Yeah, I think it creates a much safer environment to say what might help you if you know that that's going to be like considered in good faith and not just rejected outright. Because I don't know about you, I imagine we have all had situations where there've been something that would be helpful and people have been like, haha, how dare you even suggest that kind of thing. So knowing that your manager is someone, who wouldn't think a request was like strange or weird and would definitely consider it, I think is a really beneficial thing.
And I think that goes to not just managing autistic people, just even if you've got neurodivergent people in your life, the same thing. Just if you're not sure what the best thing to do for them, just ask them. Like, I'm pretty sure everyone who's neurodivergent, they have certain things. If someone asked, what could I do to make it easier? They'd be like, actually, this thing would be really, really helpful. And then they'll learn that like when you make these like accommodations, everything gets so much easier. And it's like, because it's what I've said to like my sort of support system sometimes, that the request I might be making might sound really silly and like really like, why would that help? Like, that's ridiculous. That's a really silly thing. But it's like someone's really silly small requests can make all the difference. Like, for example, with my parents, I find it really overwhelming to be asked a lot of questions when I first meet up with someone. So like hi, how are you? How's work been? I like a few minutes of silence. And then we can like start the conversation, which might seem like a really weird request to be like, hey, see, when we meet up, can we not talk for the first like 3 minutes? And then we can have conversations. But that just really helps me sort of like acclimate to the new environment. If there's like music in the car, if there's other noises going on, if we're in a restaurant, like it just gives me a second to be like, okay, I know what's going on now, I can focus. Whereas it might be easy for someone to be like, that's such a silly request, you're clearly just making up this random number on purpose. But that then makes it a lot harder. So again, I think it's just so much of this in general, like I don't think people should be afraid to ask questions to autistic and like ADHD people, as long as you're doing it in like a polite and respectful way. I think there should be more discussion about this, which is again why I talk openly, because every time I talk about this on my Instagram, I have people messaging me saying that I really relate to this experience, or people messaging saying, you know, my daughter has autism, could you give me any advice for like what I could do? And it starts people talking about these things. And even for other people, even if you don't know anyone neurodivergent, like you probably do, but if you don't think you do, just hearing about these things might help for in the future. If you do meet someone, you can be like, oh, I remember this thing, let me try that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, when my friend's son recently got an autism diagnosis, and you know, his dad said, "Oh, well, that's Elliot's autistic too," and he was just very excited because apparently now we are, and I quote, complete buddies.
That's something I do really love about being autistic, is other autistic people. It's so much easier to communicate, and obviously there's been like tons of research on that already, with like neurotypicals communicate better with neurotypicals. And neurodivergent people communicate better with neurodivergent people, which is what I found. Like when I was younger, I really struggled to keep and maintain friendships because all my friends were neurotypicals and I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing. Like clearly I was doing it wrong, but no one was telling me how to do it right. Whereas now I've got lots of neurodivergent friends, which it's so much easier to communicate. If I disappear for 2 weeks and I'm like, sorry, I was burnt out, couldn't formulate words, they're just like, cool, do you want to see a picture of a duck? And it's like, yeah, I do. And even things like that, even just having, you know, a support system where if you want to info dump this really dumb thing, they're like, yeah, go for it. You know, it's like there's a really great community of autistic people. And I think the more you surround yourself with like other neurodivergent people, the more you're like, oh, I'm actually, this isn't that weird. It's only, you know, neurotypicals that make me think it's weird. This is like pretty normal for me.
Yeah, I mean, one person said here just something that I think I can imagine what your answer is going to be, but do you find that your experiences as a neurodivergent person make you hypersensitive to others' needs in the workplace because you know how important it is for you?
Absolutely. Like I'm really bad for like, if I know a member of the team's having a bad day, I'm like, what can I do for you? Can I do anything? They're like, I don't need anything. I'm like, just give me something. Like, can I buy you a can of Coke? Would you like to go for a wee walk around the park for 20 minutes? Like, just tell me something I can do to help. Because like, this is again why I kind of fought diagnosis for a while, because I'm such an empathetic person that it's this need, I just need to help you. Just tell me what I can do. There must be something. Because when I'm like that, I'm like, there's always something. Just tell me what I can do. And like, maybe sometimes I take it too far when they're genuinely like, I just don't need anything. But I'm like, but yeah, I think it's definitely better to be too much on that side of the spectrum than not empathetic enough.
Something that occurred to me a little while ago, in terms of your training, how did you find that kind of experience? Like, did you get accommodations? Were people kind of accepting and open to being flexible in terms of your study?
So yeah, I got my autism diagnosis a couple months into when I went to college. So I didn't really ask for accommodations the first wee while, because I think I was still just figuring out so much of who I am now that I didn't really realize what to ask for. But in my second year, I had lots of like really supportive lecturers that knew I was a really hard worker. So when I was asking for things or saying that like I'm really, really struggling, like they were there to give me extensions when I needed them. My therapist even wrote them all a letter to say that, like, by the way, Jacky's a perfectionist. Can you please just tell her when she's done enough so she can stop? Otherwise, she will not stop. Just tell her when she's got an A and she can just put the laptop away. So they were really helpful with all of that. Again, I think it's because they saw that I was really trying hard. I really enjoyed it, but sometimes it was just, you know, if I was working in the kitchen and it was just too much going on that day. I need to, maybe go outside for 5-10 minutes just to let myself get a bit more relaxed. But in general, I found like I did quite well in college. Like I quite enjoyed the experience. Like I mentioned before that I went to uni for a couple of months, did not enjoy that experience, but I think just getting able to learn something I was really interested in, and something like professional cookery, there's such like a system to it. There's a right and a wrong way, and you can learn the right way, and you do it the right way, and it works. And like, even I found that working services in kitchens, I thought I would find that really stressful and hard, but it actually really worked well for my brain. There was like enough pressure. You see the checks there, you know exactly what you have to do to complete the task. And I found it was like the most my brain had gotten to like really work itself in years. So yeah, overall it was really positive. There were not all positive experiences. I had one lecturer in particular who was not very supportive of anything I was going through, but I wouldn't want that to sort of color the rest of it. It was just like a bad apple, that one.
And then the transition out of study once you kind of graduated, how did you find that?
So I think if the pandemic hadn't been going on, I think I would have found it a lot harder. But like I said, I was just plunged into the deep end. Like I didn't have time to think about how I felt about it. Like there was no time. I just had to make it work. And it honestly felt like when I got the keys to the unit, it was like I woke up and I was looking around. I was like, when did this happen? Like I was baking in my parents' kitchen and now I'm in this unit. And like I hit a wall. Like I worked too hard and it wasn't something I could maintain. Like when I opened the shop, we were very inconsistent for the first few months because I could only hack doing a couple of weeks before I had to take a week off. And then a couple of weeks, then I had to take a week off, and then went through a breakup, and then trying to deal with managing a team when you're going through a breakup and all of that. So it was definitely, a lot more inconsistent at the start. But again, that led me to getting my bakery manager and realizing that the thing I had grown was too much for me to do on my own. And it was like trying to do it on my own. Like I was a mess last summer. Like I had to go back on antidepressants. I had just gotten completely burnt out. I'd lost all my momentum, but I'm like starting to get that back now. So that's something I definitely will be keeping in mind a bit more going forward, is that I don't need to grow it so much so soon, which is what I did initially. But again, that was because I had to make a name for myself. But yeah, it was ridiculous. I was working literally every single day, not taking any days off. Even now I've managed, I get one day off a week and I'm proud of that. I have my day off a week, but for so long I just pushed myself way past my limit. And I guess not even as a neurodivergent person, but just in general, no one should be working that much. But yeah, so it's definitely been a learning curve, learning how to run a business as someone who's neurodivergent, because like you said, it's not like there's forums out there of like neurodivergent business owners. There's not many people I can talk to. Like the only people I talk to are like other businesses. They understand totally what I go through on the business side of things, but they wouldn't from like an autism side of things. And then I've got like my neurodivergent friends who understand the neurodivergent side of things, but not the business side of things. So it definitely has felt quite like a lonely experience, but hopefully as time goes on, there will be more neurodivergent business owners, because I think it's such a power to be able to run a business and all these traits that you get from it, which people try and paint as negative are so amazing. And like when a neurodivergent person puts their mind to something, it's like amazing to see them just like power through and like get it done and like defy all odds. And it's something that I don't even think this is like something special that I've done. Like any neurodivergent person can do this. Like my mental health was a mess. I was nowhere near the person I am now, but I managed to do it. So like if I can do this, anyone else can do it. like and I do really mean that. Like I don't know how I've managed this, but somehow it seems to have worked.
I think the amazing product has definitely helped in there as well.
On that note, it does sound like there's an ice cream van, and is it currently snowing?
Yes.
Just to give context to anyone watching the recording.
Yeah, sorry, I live in Denniston, so apparently city centre, Denniston. Ice cream, 5:00 on a Thursday.
Naturally.
In the snow.
Prime time.
Is there anything in the chat? Just so we can go into the Q&A if there's anything that we haven't really addressed yet.
Mainly, we have one more that's a question about if you were interviewing people for new positions, one quite often discussed thing that can be really helpful, partly for autistic people, partly for people in general, is to have the questions in advance. And the question is what you think about that, if that's something that you would do or you think would be helpful to people like you, like us.
So I'd never thought about doing that before. I always have a very relaxed interview style. So the first thing I always say to people when they come in is like, relax, don't worry. Like there's no like trick questions here. Like I invited you in because you have all the skills necessary. So like, I know you're qualified. This is just to kind of get to know you a bit more. So I do try and create a much more relaxed environment in the interview, even when it's, you know, things like asking what their weakness is. It's being like, don't worry, not a trick question. Genuinely, just as an employer, is good to know where you think you might struggle so we can make sure we're giving you the training on those things. And then at the end of the interview, I always ask people if they have any sort of disabilities, health conditions, mental health conditions, anxiety, anything going on in their life that could affect work, not to disqualify them as a candidate, but so we can know in advance if there's any accommodations we can put in. So, you know, I've had staff before saying that actually, yeah, I do really struggle with anxiety. And sometimes I wake up and I'm just not in a good spot. And I'm like, cool, if that happens, send me a message. You can come in an hour later, you know, things like that, where if I don't know what's going on, I can't help them. But it's something I really try. So like I always make the interviews as relaxed as possible because I don't want to scare them. Like that's not what I'm there to do. I'm there to learn more about them and feel like, would you be a good fit for the team? I'm not trying to like trip them up because what's the point in that? Like I want them to want to work for us and like the company. So yeah, I do try really hard to kind of even show in the interviews that like we will try our hardest here. And like I tell them as well, you know, I'm autistic, I've got ADHD. Sometimes, you know, I might be really direct, all these things, but we're all in this together. I just want to make sure my staff are as happy as possible. And I'd feel awful if a member of staff didn't tell me that they were having a lot of issues with anxiety. They were an hour late. I get pissed off at them. You know, it's like, I wouldn't want to do that. So that's why it's kind of like, I'd be more pissed off if you didn't tell me. And then just let me know, we can like work around it sort of thing. I let people take mental health days if they need them. We try and not make it too regular of a thing, just so it's not, doesn't encourage too much of that. But I've worked for so many places that have ruined my mental health, and I don't want to do that. Like it shouldn't be part of hospitality that you work yourself to the bone and have an awful time. Like I'm not about that. I don't want to work in there anymore. I'm not going to make my team work in that environment anymore. And I hope more businesses do this as well, because it's not hard. Like reasonable accommodations are called reasonable accommodations for a reason. They're reasonable. You know, no one's asking you to change the name of your business and paint everything blue because they don't like yellow. It's like, can you turn the air conditioning up a bit? Can I wear a soft jumper? Like, it's not crazy things.
I wonder if, like, I have no idea, but I just wonder if there's something about this that, like, I'm autistic too, so I not surprising that I see things from the same perspective as you, but I wonder if there's something about it that for us makes it easier to see, like, sort of a bit like cause and effect and the reasons for doing things, and whether, like, okay, well, if this is what I'm trying to achieve, then okay, this seems like a reasonable way of doing that, rather than a kind of, but these are the rules and the rules must be followed type thing. I know we're coming to the end of time, but I did want to just pass on a few things from the chat, which are compliments. So there is the sentiment that I think a lot, like, the people would love it if you were their manager, and that it's really good to hear, like, the highs and lows of things, and like your authenticness and your passion and things like that. So we'll save the chat transcript so you can read through all the compliments at a later date if you'd like to.
There's a question that came to me directly as well, but I think we've kind of addressed this as part of the discussion in terms of managing paperwork and tax returns, and perhaps some unhelpful neurotypical advice about, you know, just go for it. It's straightforward and easy. But yeah, I think we've covered that. I'll just very quickly stop the recording in case someone wants to ask a question that is not recorded.